Thank you for this wonderful welcome. Thank you to the people of Jakarta and thank you to the people of Indonesia. I'm so glad that I made it to Indonesia and that Michelle was able to join me. We had a couple of false starts this year, but I was determined to visit a country that has meant so much to me. Unfortunately, it's a fairly quick visit, but I look forward to coming back a year from now when Indonesia hosts the East Asia Summit. Before I go any further, I want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with all of those Indonesians affected by the recent tsunami and volcanic eruptions, particularly those who have lost loved ones and those who have been displaced. As always, the United States stand with Indonesia in responding to this natural disaster, and we are pleased to be able to help as needed, as neighbors help neighbors and families taken in this place. I know that the strength and resilience of the Indonesian people will pull you through once more. Let me begin with a simple statement. Indonesia is a part of me. I first came to this country when my mother married an Indonesian man named Lolo Sutoro. As a young boy, I was coming to a different world, but the people of Indonesia quickly made me feel at home. Jakarta looked very different in those days. The city was filled with buildings that were no more than a few stories tall. The Hotel Indonesia was one of the few high rises, and there was this one brand new shopping center called Sarina. Trucks outnumbered automobiles in those days, and the highway quickly gave way to unpaved roads and kampongs. We moved to Menteng Dalam, where we lived in a small house with a mango tree out front. I learned to love Indonesia while flying kites, running along paddy fields, catching dragonflies, and buying sate and baso from the street vendors. Most of all, I remember the people, the old men and women who welcomed us with smiles, the children who made the foreigner feel like a neighbor, and the teachers who helped me learn about the wider world. Because Indonesia is made up of thousands of islands, hundreds of languages, and people from scores of religions and ethnic groups, my times here helped me appreciate the common humanity of all people. And while my stepfather, like most Indonesians, was raised a Muslim, he firmly believed that all religions were worthy of respect. In this way, he reflected the spirit of religious tolerance that is enshrined in Indonesia's constitution and that remains one of this country's defining and inspiring characteristics. I stayed here for 4 years, a time that helped shape my childhood, a time that saw the birth of my wonderful sister Maya, and a time that made such an impression on my mother that she kept returning to Indonesia over the next 20 years to live, work, and travel, pursuing her passion of promoting opportunity in Indonesia's villages, particularly for women and girls, for her entire life. My mother held this place and its people close to her heart. So much has changed in the 4 decades since I boarded a plane to move back to Hawaii. If you ask me or any of my schoolmates who knew me back then, I don't think any of us could have anticipated that I would one day come back to Jakarta as President of the United States. And few could have anticipated the remarkable story of Indonesia over the last 4 decades. The Jakarta that I once knew has grown to a teeming city of nearly 10 million, with skyscrapers that dwarf the whole Indonesia and thriving centers of culture and commerce. While my Indonesian friends and I used to run in the fields with water buffalo and goats, a new generation of Indonesians is among the most wired in the world, connected through cell phones and social networks. And while Indonesia as a young nation focuses inward, a growing Indonesia now plays a key role in the Asia Pacific and the global economy. This change extends to politics. When my stepfather was a boy, he watched his own father and older brother leave home to fight and die in the struggle for Indonesian independence. I'm happy to be here on Heroes Day to honor the memory of so many Indonesians who have sacrificed on behalf of this great country. When I moved to Jakarta, it was 1967, a time that followed great suffering and conflict in parts of this country. Even though my stepfather had served in the army, the violence and killing during that time of political upheaval was largely unknown to me because it was unspoken by my Indonesian family and friends. In my household, like so many other across Indonesia, it was an invincible presence. Indonesians had their independence, but fear was not far away. In the years since then, Indonesia has charted its own course through an extraordinary democratic transformation from the rule of an iron fist to the rule of the people. In recent years, the world has watched with hope and admiration. As Indonesians embrace the peaceful transfer of power and the direct election of leaders, and just as your democracy is symbolized by your elected president and legislature, your democracy is sustained and fortified by its checks and balance, a dynamic civil society, political parties and unions, a vibrant media and engaged citizen who have ensured that in Indonesia there will be no turning back. But even as this land of my youth has changed in so many ways, those things that I learned to love about Indonesia, the spirit of tolerance that is written into your constitution, symbolized in your mosques and churches and temples, and embodied in your people, still lives on. Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. This is the foundation of Indonesia's example to the world, and this is why Indonesia will play such an important role in the 21st century. So today I return to Indonesia as a friend but also as a president who seeks a deep and enduring partnership between our two countries. Because as vast and diverse countries, as neighbors on either side of the Pacific, and above all as democracies, the United States and Indonesia are bound together by shared interests and shared values. Yesterday, President Yudhoyono and I announced a new comprehensive partnership between the United States and Indonesia. We are increasing ties between our governments in many different areas. And just as importantly, we are increasing ties among our people. This is a partnership of equals grounded in mutual interest and mutual respect. With the rest of my time today, I'd like to talk about why the story I just told, the story of Indonesia since the days when I lived there, is so important to the United States and to the world. I will focus on three areas that are closely related, fundamental to human progress, development, democracy, and religion. First, the friendship between the United States and Indonesia can advance our mutual interests in development. When I moved to Indonesia, it would have been hard to imagine a future in which the prosperity of families in Chicago and Jakarta would be connected. But our economies are now global, and Indonesians have experienced both the promise and perils of globalization, from the shock of the Asia financial crisis in the 1990s to the million lifted out of poverty. What that means and what we learned in the recent economic crisis is that we have a stake in each other's success. America has a stake in an Indonesia that is growing, with prosperity that is broadly shared among the Indonesian people, because the rising middle class here means new markets for our goods. Just as America is a market for yours, and so we are investing more in Indonesia. Our exports have grown by nearly 50%, and we are opening doors for American and Indonesians to do business with one another. America has a stake in an Indonesia that plays its rightful role in shaping the global economy. Gone are the days when seven or eight countries could come together to determine the direction of global market. That is why the G20 is now the center of international economic cooperation, so that emerging economies like Indonesia have a greater voice and bear greater responsibility. And through its leadership of the G20's anti-corruption group, Indonesia should lead on the world stage and an example in embracing transparency and accountability. America has a stake in an Indonesia that pursues sustainable development, because the way we grow will determine the quality of our lives and the health of our planet. This is why we are developing clean energy technologies that can power industry and preserve Indonesia's precious natural resources. And America welcomes your country's strong leadership in the global effort to combat climate change. Above all, America has a stake in the success of the Indonesian people. Underneath the headlines of the day, we must build bridges between our peoples, because our future security and prosperity is shared. That is exactly what we are doing by increased collaboration among our scientists and researchers, and by working together to foster entrepreneurship. And I'm especially pleased that we have committed to double the number of American and Indonesian students studying in our respective countries. We want more Indonesian students in our schools and more American students to come study in this country, so that we can forge new ties that last well into this young century. These are the issues that really matter in our daily lives: development, After all, it's not simply about growth rates and numbers on the balance sheet. It's about whether a child can learn the skills they need to make it in a changing world. It's about whether a good idea is allowed to grow into a business and not be suffocated by corruption. It's about whether those forces that have transformed the Jakarta that I once knew, technology and trade and the flow of people and goods, translate into a better life for human beings, a life marked by dignity and opportunity.